Hello, everyone. This is Professor Hamamoto. It is September 9th. Oh, yes, 2022, 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Welcome, one, welcome all. I welcome all of you here in the live chat, and those of you who are watching, feel free to chime in. I have a lot of really soothing video. It's really hot still. It's kind of cooling down, but in the coastal area, it's hot, but at least they have the great Oceana Pacifica right there. And what you're seeing here is some footage from we're going to be talking about a specific area or a town or township city on the Monterey Bay, specifically Santa Cruz, California, or as Arnold Schwarzenegger would say, California. Right? It gives it a more fascist ring to it. And we'll be talking about techno-fascism as part of today's topic, not coincidentally. But this is a scenic route. This is around Pebble Beach. You might know this if you're a golfer, one of the famed golf areas, centers, right? Pebble Beach Golf Course. This is on the Monterey Bay area. Beautiful, scenic. It's no wonder that Silicon Valley and all of the Pentagon and all the different intelligence agencies, and yes, even American institutions, have decided to settle and colonize and make this their base of operations. But indeed, this process goes back centuries. And that's the perspective. I'm not going to bore you with history, don't worry. But that's the perspective that Professor Hamamoto will bring to you today on September 8th. Now, this talk was influenced by a recent acquisition, thanks to my generous Patreon supporters, published in 2022, Murder Capital of the World. That's a pretty sensational piece of clickbait, isn't it? But I'm not going to stop there. This is only the beginning, right? Very well done book, by the way, Emerson Murray, for what he's accomplished. I'm sure he has no idea of what the serial murders that took place in Santa Cruz, California in the early 1970s. I'm sure he has, I'm fairly sure that he has very little understanding of why it was Santa Cruz that became the epicenter of all this demonic evil, satanic. And as I'm saying, it goes back centuries. More than that, I am alluding to the fact, right, as in the title of this talk today, that California is the model, the world model for techno-missionary enslavement. Techno-missionary enslavement. What do I mean by missionary? I'm alluding to the California under the auspices of the Spanish Empire. When you talk about the Spanish Empire, you're not just talking about España or España. You're talking about the House of Coburg, the Habsburg, and all these different related, blood-related families of primarily Northern Europe and Italia as well, and the papal states as well as the Vatican. So, we have to kind of break down, not for our purposes, but for the purposes of pedagogy and understanding, saying when I say España or the Spanish Empire, I'm talking about an entire network, an array of world powers that are in play in this little patch of the world where I happen to inhabit in Sacramento. Right, all the place names have a San or Santa or Sacra. It's suffused with seemingly providential, primarily Roman Catholic sensibility, political control, aspiration, right? They're euphonious, right? And as a person who was not born here, I was born in the territory of Hawaii, but I was primarily raised and schooled in the state of California. We learned this history. It was part of the curriculum. Also, the university, you got to study California history. And of course, a good deal of it, as we know by now, was, to put it mildly, far from accurate. So this book called The Murder Capital of the World was the inspiration. But of course, I have a much deeper understanding of the world system and what I call New World Order theory. And I'm glad that a colleague at the University of California, while not I would assume, not subscribing to the idea of a global systemic New World Order system that supports his thesis. Nonetheless, I agree, and I'm sure you would agree with my assessment. His name is Professor Benjamin Madley, and he's a professor of Native American Studies at the University of California, Los Angeles, or Los Angeles. I'm not going to be too pedantic about the pronunciations, okay? So I'm not going to be bothering you with Los Angeles. I'll say Los Angeles because you might be confused, or San Francisco. I'm not going to be pedantic. However, when I hear supposed experts on everything that's New World Order talk about Yamashita's gold, that kind of grates on me because that's Yamashita. Why don't you learn it correctly? That tells me you're just a YouTuber like everybody else, and you don't know anything about Asia and Japan. You don't know for the fact that anything about the Franciscans being in China 3 centuries before they ever came into the Spanish territories. They're already trying to colonize my part of the world before they even started with the so-called New World. You understand? Because as I was trying to or have been trying to establish with this network of researchers, the Asian part of the world, the Turkic Mongolian, is not even considered. And that's the reason why I went into Asian American studies, not because I was a loser, because most of the people who were my colleagues felt embarrassed by it because they couldn't get a real academic appointment in a real department, whereas I saw it as an opportunity to radically revision the historiography that's been flawed from the get-go, even in the so-called radical areas of sociology, history, and the allied areas, right? So yes, Professor Benjamin Mad. This is not going to be an academic talk. Don't worry. Benjamin Madley is in the history department and American Indian Studies programs, University UCLA. He's also a fellow at the Swedish Collegium for Advanced Studies. So this is global in nature. I hope the Swedes, my friends, we had um, Pele Taylor here, who is, I think he was born in Sweden, has an English father, lives in Sweden, Stockholm right now. And this is a fairly recent article by Professor Madley, and it appeared in a juried peer-reviewed journal, the Pacific Historical Review. It's one that I've read since I was a grad student. I don't have a subscription currently, and I'm sure they would never admit me into their ranks because I take it further and try to talk about the world historical New World Order forces that are involved in what Professor Madley only calls the uh, incarceration system. That's the title of his article. It's called California's First Mass Incarceration System. No, it wasn't the California prison system. It was the California missionary system. Hence the allusion that I have in my title here. But I call it Techno-Missionary because the people who followed in the footprints of the California missionaries set up by Junipero Serra, and I'm not going to be pedantic, I'm going to say Serra, okay? Junipero Serra. Um, the people who are the successors to that are in the state of California. The high tech, the surveillance, the DARPA Pentagon capital of the world. You know it as Silicon Valley. I fondly call it Pentagon Valley or DARPA Valley, right? So you've heard me say this in previous talks. I'm building it out, but I'm more specifically applying it, the lessons, the harsh and cruel, inhumane lessons that were sustained by the native peoples of what is now California, and of course through the Americas in general. But I'm talking like the West Coast here, California in specific, that were visited upon the native peoples of California. And by the way, you're not going to hear an Antifa screed and BLT and a La Raza, which renamed itself Unidos because they heard my talk about being La Raza itself being a racist term. So they changed their organizational name. I'm not taking credit for it. Excuse me. My voice is still a little rough from the lack of use. I'm still getting the ring rust off here. Um, So I'm providing you a continuity, historical continuity of the system. And in doing so, hopefully and I'm not Indian, I'm not saying that as a disclaimer of sort of either pride or shame. I'm just saying I'm not native, but I can learn and you can learn. We can all learn, even if you're not living in California, the lessons of the native Californian Indians that were visited upon them by the New World Order of their day, the Old World Order, which is still pretty much in play here, and how we might avert their faith by being put into a similar techno gulag or techno missionary system that are being promoted by people with this missionary zeal. Aren't they the new millennialists of the Great Reset millennium? Right? They have this sort of uh, this sort of holy mission. If I don't mean to demean real priests and nuns and people who are genuinely promoting and looking to the welfare of people. I'm just talking about the cynics who have infiltrated these institutions and in some cases even taken it over. Right. This is a protective measure that I am providing us here. And as you can see, I cleverly put in this graphic of the autonomous so-called vehicle Uber Eats Nuro. This is how we're gonna our food, everything's gonna be brought to our little ranchera, right? In California in the 50s, in the suburban sprawl area, the growth period, right at the endless summer, the Beach Boys were later memorialized. They would call these rancheras or ranches. They would market them. So everybody was going to be his own hidalgo. Everybody was going to be his own overseer of his little of course, they were just sucking us, everybody into the whole New World Order model. But this is where it's going. Uber Eats, Uber in general, the Uber world. Uber in German, as you mean over Ubermensch. I don't think that was an accident. So, if you like, you can look into the previous talks I've given a year and a half worth, and this is why it's worthwhile subscribing so you can have access to that, the whole playlist. Professor Hamamoto playlist. And I've given previous talks on UC Santa Cruz. There's not going to be much overlap here. Let me get that. Yeah, let me give myself the full screen since that video ended. So I've done a little bit on UC Santa Cruz and why it's one of the creepiest UCs of them all. The birthplace, at least the first conferences on the so-called Human Genome Project were held at UC Santa. Like I've always said, it's always those schools that people don't pay much attention to. UC Santa Cruz is one of them. And they self-consciously cultivated this notion as that's where the alternative types who don't want to go to UC, Berkeley or UCLA, the academically rigorous places, but want to do more of a liberal arts curriculum, more hippy-dippy, more beachy, Monterey Bay, artsy, craftsy. And of course, while they're promoting this image of UC Santa Cruz being that, you've got people like Edward Kemper III running around being a serial killer, or some character like this, Herbert Mullen, who was a serial killer in Santa Cruz, preying on this whole idyllic utopian community that was really envisioned, according to the articles I've been looking at, which aren't available online anymore. Remember, I'm not a Googler. Okay, I'm a researcher, and I look at old books. I look at books that were published in the mid 19th century that are talking about Santa Cruz, and I know by the late 19th century and the early 20th century for sure, Santa Cruz was seen as a very special part on the earth. And you know that the East Coast elites and people even overseas, like the royals, all the Eurotrash, had a very good idea of where they were going to settle in to bring about the 21st century techno-missionary system that we're seeing being born right as we speak today, as we gather today. And of course, further down from the Monterey Bay is Mission Santa Barbara, or known as Santa Barbara County, and one of its high wealth, elite, super elite zip codes of Montecito, Montecito. Yes, that's in Santa. It's further south of what I'm talking about. Don't worry, I'm working my way down there, but we're going to start with the Monterey Bay. And of course, you may know Monterey Bay is Cannery Row, John Steinbeck. You read the book, and so you have all these fond associations. But little did you know that a serpent's egg was hatching all this time when Santa Cruz was claiming the mantle of being the real surf city, not Huntington Beach, California. That's Orange County. They call themselves Surf City. It's actually, Santa Cruz. Who cares, right? Let me show you another little pleasing because it's so hot here. I want to see the beach. Son of a beach. I want to see the walking tour. I want to see. Yeah, here we go. Santa Cruz. I'll give you some ambient sound. Looks like any other beautiful. Look how blue the sky is. I feel 10 degrees cooler already. But let me have a drink anyway. Of water. There you go, the real surf city. Okay, this gets a little boring after a while, but here we go. All right. Yeah, you can jaywalk in Surf City. And if you're a New Yorker, of course, yeah, jaywalker, yeah, that must be a California thing. Yeah, you're too cool for school in New York City. It's where you're locked down. That's probably the most oppressed major metropolitan area in the country because you're just too cool. Just too wise, and you're just too smart for your own good. And yeah. Anyway, here's a walking glimpse of downtown Santa Cruz, as the natives would say, or if you want to be pedantic about it. Look how cute it is. By the way, Davis is kind of a scaled down version of Santa Cruz. Of course, the streets are narrow because it's bicycle priority in Davis. Davis, however, UC Davis, that's a Masonic town. Freemasonic mafia runs that, and I'll get into the relevance of that in a moment. So you get the idea. It's a university town. It's got, really good public. I'm not. By the way, I don't mean to put anybody down. A lot of people live there. I've stayed at their homes, and here they got the whole half. I'm not putting it down, so don't get me wrong. I mean, for God, I mean, I live in Sacramento. Who can I really put anybody else down? I really can't. It's the state capital, but that's about all. I mean, again, I don't want to put down Sacramentans either because I like it here. I've been able to really, really understand the New World Order from this unique vantage point. Again, because Sacramento, no one really pays any attention to it. All right, so that's allowed me a good deal of freedom to do my work. No one bothers me. No one visits me. That's really good. I don't have any house guests. If I live in San Francisco, because I know I lived in Anaheim when I was growing up, and we had guests every summer who were going to go to Disneyland. I never had any privacy for the whole summer. So anyway, that's the good part about living in Podunk, I guess. All right, there's a lot of gimmicks in Santa Cruz. Some of you live in California. I've never been there, but there's I guess it's nationally famous Santa Cruz mystery spot. I'll just give you plug your ears because the voice is really irritating, right? But here goes. This is the mystery spot.
Hi everyone! If you live in California, then you've definitely seen a lot of cars with a bumper sticker that says mystery spot, where supposedly it's a gravitational anomaly. Balls seem to roll uphill, and nothing is straight anymore. Is it really true? What's it like when you actually go there? We've always wondered about that, so we finally got to visit Mystery Spot.
There you go. You see some of the tourists going through the old spiel. I doubt if I'll go there, not because I'm a snob. It's just that, I don't know. I'd rather visit other places. But by the way, if you're interested, it's only $8, which is pretty cheap these days. Of course, parking is $5. It might be more these days. I don't know. And the reason I mention this is because this fella here, Herbert Mullins, he killed a family right by the Santa Cruz mystery spot. among other. He also killed a priest nearby as well. And of course, we're talking about the particularly Franciscan, and previous to that, the Jesuit infiltration of first for Mission San Diego and the further south, right, and what later became California, and then what was called Alta California, Upper California. That's where I live, right, northern. And for us here are the dividing line between northern and southern California, which we all know and somehow respect, because the Southern Californians hate the and the Northern Californians really hate the LA people. San Francisco people, they, oh, yeah. I mean, I hate all this this home team type mentality. Oh yeah, I lived in Osaka, and you're from Tokyo, so I live in San Francisco all my life. You live in Sacramento. Like, that's such BS. I hate that sort of rah boosterism. But we have that here in California, and the dividing line is typically around Santa Barbara is like the the midpoint. In case you're interested, which you're probably not. Um, so that's the mystery spot, and I mention that only because I think there's some sort of magnetic, geomagnetic, geophysical anomalies that are in these mission spots. And this is for one of you who have studied the work of some of the burial sites in northern North America, or better yet, Stonehenge. Right? They call them ley lines, Ley. Don't know much about him, or we've had on, I've alluded to him at least. Court Lindahl, who's spoken a lot about Northern California and all the different geomantic connections between all the way to Rende Chateau, right? About the Knights Templar and all. So I think there might be that connection that hasn't really been explored thoroughly. So this is for you to collaborate on this. You don't have to contact me; do it on your own. But I think that might be one of the reasons for the citing of all these different quote unquote Spanish. When I say Spanish, I'm talking about New World Order, Habsburg, uh, King of France. I know they were, at war from time to time, the British Crown, right? All the sites that we're going to be talking, not all of them, but many of them we're going to be talking. Fascinating, huh? Now, it's not just, well, let me just build out, because I have an anecdote here for you. Let's add to the stream. That stands for Cal State University, Monterey Bay. Again, we're talking about that same beautiful area that some people compare to the most scenic places on the Mediterranean, right? And CSUMB used to be a military base. It was decommissioned, and it was turned into one of the, I think they're 2021, maybe more now, Cal States, and there are about 10. University of California was meant to be a graduate school, graduate medical professional law school, and the Cal States were meant to be undergraduate. It's not a strict division anymore. In fact, most of the students at the UCs are undergraduate, but it's still, most of the funding is coming from these research entities, University of California. And that's why it has greater standing, higher standing than the Cal States. But the Cal States are still important because of their military connection, and as feeders for the teaching of, they do a lot of teacher education at the Cal States, including this place. And I gave a talk there. That's why I wanted to kind of bring it in. Here's some of the very beautiful campuses. I mean, gosh. I mean, it's no wonder why the Cal States and the UCs and the private schools like Stanford attract students from all over the world, including a lot from China. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why the United States is not going to go to war with China, because their best and brightest are right here. And I taught some of them. I designed a course specifically for them because I knew where this is going. So we have them here, right? Unless there's going to be a mass evacuation of tens of thousands of Chinese nationals who are in higher education, there's not going to be any hostilities. That might be a game anyway that are being played. All right. And the reason why I wanted to show you that is one of my students at UC Davis, who became an administrator there in student services, remembered me from the earlier days before I was involved with refining New World Order studies, she invited me in and I gave a talk on the New World Order and how the Monterey Bay. So she was completely shocked and embarrassed. The students loved my talk, however, and she refused. As soon as I got through my talk, she got rid of me. We were supposed to have, they were going to treat me to dinner afterwards, but she said, "You find it yourself." And I did. Monterey downtown has really great eateries open late at night. California cuisine. So, and in fact, I was kind of glad that I didn't have to like talk about the old days to this person I hardly knew. But anyway, I've been to the area. Leon Panetta, remember him? He's from that area. A lot of these people that you mock on the supposed conservative media, your Kamala Harris's, your Nancy Pelosi's, all these people, you have you're clueless about what they truly represent, and that's why the power elite and these people welcome you to mock them. They like it when you make fun of Gavin Newsom or whoever else. Okay, let's look at the godfather of all this. Well, he's not the godfather. He's one of the chief emissary. I spoke of him as Father Junipero Serra, and I don't mean to demean any of the great Catholic nuns and priests who are sincere. I'm just talking about the ones who are up to no good. And as I have read in some articles, which in books that you don't find anymore, this was new to me in researching this piece here. The Jesuits were kicked out of the state of California by the Freemasons who took it over. And watch Court Lindahl's pieces about the Freemasonic power structure in the early days before California statehood even. But they knew, they were in conflict with him in Europe. So they knew what España was involved with, and the Society of Jesus was involved with when they were setting up these missionaries. So they kicked the Jesuits out there by law. And of course, even the Pope of Rome, the Vatican, I don't know what the proper term is, but they decertified the Jesuits. They've been decertified or denounced by the Vatican several times. They're back in power now, very, very strong. And they're very strong in San Francisco, as I'll get into it. The University of San Francisco, which is a Jesuit institution, is totally queered. That's their own term. They said, we're going to queer every institution over there. And they've succeeded in the University of San Francisco, which one of my ex-colleagues who kind of snuck in there and later became like a deputy chief commissioner of San Francisco. I won't give you his name, but he's supposedly a scholar of immigration. He always is kind of like a couple of other people in my department. I never really understood how they got there, but I think they were hooked in. They were linked in somehow. I don't know. So I'm not going to dox them, but people who know me in the department I'm in, you probably can figure out who I'm talking about. So here's the guy that really, it's a very short, not even a video. I'm at the stream here. I'll narrate it. That's Serra. He's the apostle. He's buried in California. You can visit his tomb. I think it's in, I don't want to guess wrong, but Carmel, I think, which is, if you check it out, is a really elite area, Carmel by the sea sometime. I think Clint Eastwood lived in Carmel, to give you an idea. This is his crypt, or what purports to be his crypt. I haven't visited it. I think this is Mission San Bautista. I can't remember. By the way, if you have a chance, visit the California missions. I have nothing against the mission. They're beautiful. I went to San Juan Capistrano a lot. This is on the way down to San Diego. And San Diego itself has a mission, San Diego de Alcalá, which was the first of the system, by the way. It's the southernmost. And the swallows come back to San Juan Capistrano. My dad, to his credit, had itchy feet, and he would take us everywhere. I have to give him credit for it. He packed the kids in the car, and we drove to all kinds of different areas in California, and I'm eternally grateful to him. This is where his quarters were, Father Serra, and I'm calling him Father Serra, not because I'm Roman Catholic. I was never confirmed. Something told me, hey, step back from it, even though I took catechism and went to Mass with my father, who was Roman Catholic. And he lived, by the way, the Franciscans were were formed so they could embrace a life of poverty as a way to worship Jesus and God, right? So the intentions originally were good. And you have the order for women or nuns, the order of the Poor Clares. I think that's where this town of Claremont came from. So when I'm talking about this history, keep in mind that there's dimensions or aspects of it which I believe were pure of heart, pure of intention, right? Which were later subverted or taken over. And maybe it's swinging back, maybe with talks like such as this, modest as they are and as a general as they are, may get people to thinking more deeply about what they have here to now taken for granted. And here's, of course, a statue of him. And there's many, many flattering books about Father Sierra, all right, California Indians, transformation of the missionary. A lot of them are flattering, a lot of them are propagandistic, a lot of them who are done from the opposite perspective. You can probably tell where my sympathies lie, but I'm not going to get into that at this point. Right? That's not the gist of today's talk. So that's the founder of the whole missionary system. And before we leave today, we will get at least one look at from the perspective of California natives, not me, but from native people themselves. And it's not going to be pedantic. It's not going to be scolding. It's not going to be like Antifa. The native people who've really studied the history in truth are full of love, forgiveness. Many of them are Christians. Many of them are Roman Catholic. All right. So it's not what Antifa and BLM and La Raza, they're trying to draw these polarities, but the real people who they purport to represent are like you and me, and they're friendly. They're not hostile. They're really cool. They're bright. They're intelligent, and they just are respectful human beings. You give them your respect. They give you uh, their respect of you as a human being. Yeah, they recognize that, right? And I think you all know this. We none of us have really bought into the the synthetic movements, right? So you have the mission San Diego, and we didn't go to the missions, but when we were down at the Charette down in La Jolla, which is part of that area, you got the idea? Beautiful, right? Theodore Giesel had a beautiful view up there, a Dr. Seuss, so called. That's what we're talking about. And you've got the Mission de Alcalá down there. Take a look. I've never been to that one. And further on down, I don't know how many there's, can't count right away, but over a dozen. I already talked about San Juan Capistrano, San Gabriel, the Mission Hills, San Buenaventura, which I did visit. I lived there for one summer. It's now called Ventura. That's one of the areas where the border, the kind of the middle between North and Southern California, and the Santa Barbara, which I'll be revisiting when I dig into Montecito. That's where the world's first incel, quote unquote, was named, identified, right? The guy who killed all the Chinese students. Yes, they were mostly Chinese students. Most of you focused on the sorority girls that were killed, and I'm not minimizing their deaths or their being wounded, but he stabbed to death his own roommates who were Chinese nationals, foreign student. I'm not even going to say his name. You know who I am. He is, right? He was in Isla Vista or Santa Barbara, in that area. Lompoc, San Luis Obispo. By the way, one of the better Cal states is Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo. And a lot of those graduates go to work in DARPA Valley. Soledad, Carmel, which I mentioned, that's where I think Caseta is buried, San Juan Bautista. And then here we are, Santa Cruz, but it goes even further, Santa Clara. And there is a Santa Clara University. I think that's where Leon Panetta graduated. I think a lot of the California political establishment, you'll find out, graduated from University of Santa Clara, which is a Jesuit. And it's called the Santa Clara Valley. We know it as the Silicon Valley, but it's Santa Clara. And that's where San Jose is, another sun. right? I think it's the eighth, ninth largest city in the United States. That's where you fly into when you go visit all of the, Stanford or the so-called Silicon Valley. Fremont, that's where Cal State East Bay is. Fremont became all thugged out and gangsters, so they changed it from Cal State Hayward to East Bay. They made it more generic. San Francisco, then all the way up to San Rafael. Okay, you get the idea. All these different outposts, perhaps built upon ley lines. And here we go. Not coincidentally, many of these sites that I have mentioned have universities of California on it. And one of the most recent additions to the UC system was Santa Cruz. And I have some papers which are not reports that are not available anywhere else that date back to 1960. They're typewritten and mimeographed. All right, I have copies of these reports by the University of California and all the different consultants approaching the city fathers of Santa Cruz and saying, "This is what you're going to do for your community of Santa Cruz, and we're going to build an incredible institution of higher learning. It's going to be the jewel in the crown of this particular part of the Monterey Bay Area, but of course, it's really one of the jewels in the crown of the New World Order, right? Of course, how were they to know? I don't blame them. It's an offer that's pretty difficult to resist. So I have all those planning papers, environmental impact, and then decades later, in the 70s at the university, I can't remember when it was built, but it was sometime in the early, maybe mid 60s. UC Irvine was also being built up at the same time. This is really a period of growth for the UC system. There are all kinds of academic jobs that were opening up to people with very low qualifications. I know because a lot of them became my professors in grad school. Some people who were just total duds. And I was going, how did you ever get in the bar was a lot, just like at Stanford. Stanford University of even the 60s is not the Stanford you know today. All right. So whenever you hear people say, yeah, I have a degree from Stanford, like, when'd you get it? This is back in 1942. Like, okay, well, or Yale, for that matter. They had their own system, social system, but the academics I'm talking about here. Okay, so you got that connection? The footprint, the anchor that was set by the Jesuit / Franciscan / Roman Catholic Vatican system of conquering the west coast of California, which is really pointing towards Asia. I've told you this before about the University of California. Fannie Hurst, right, of the famous Hearst family, Citizen Hearst, William Randolph Hearst. Fannie Hurst, who was totally in the occult, by the way, she had the original architectural gate of the University of California redirected a few degrees so it would be pointed overseas to Manila. And that, not coincidentally, was its first Asian colony, Spanish-American War. Tens of thousands of Filipino civilians killed, right? And later on, their descendants were brought into the U.S. Navy. And more recently, their descendants were settling in where? Santa Clara Valley, San Jose, and all these areas. And they were taught a brainwashed colonial history, military U.S. Navy history, saying the Japanese are the enemy. The Japanese Americans are the enemies of the Filipino Americans. And I know that because I was close to Filipino Americans all my life. And then when I got into the University of California, it began to change within about 10 years of my arrival. Then all the Filipino American students started to harass me, and say, yeah, we're gonna separate you. You're part of the enemy. But you're the Jesuits. You're the ones called son, from King Felipe. You were the colonized country. Right? My country, Japan, resisted colonization of the Jesuits of the British East Asia country. And that's why the Philippines became a third world country. And that's why Japan became a first world country and said, we're going to stay at the first rank of the country, even if you have to nuke us. That was their commitment. So, by the way, they're rearming and remilitarizing to the teeth right now. Anyway, that's just a little bit of personal information I wanted to put in there because this is not just an academic exercise for me, and this is for my Filipino American friends who think I'm the enemy. No, the enemy is the U.S. Naval Intelligence, who were pimping out your fathers and making whole generations of Filipinos and Filipinas into transsexuals at all the different bars, right? And the whole gay culture that had its first foothold in all the different bases by Subic Bay in the military. And it later moved to Thailand. I'm sorry to hear just yesterday that some of it's getting into Saigon in Vietnam, right? That's another talk, right? And that's why I taught Asian American sexuality, because I was seeing this takeover being executed on many different levels. Okay, let me now allow Native people to speak for themselves. I'm not going to speak on their behalf. Let them give you an overview of how they view the colonization, settlement, and the genocide. And by the way, I'm going to post this article, California's Mass Incarceration System. I'm going to post it on my Patreon. If you have grandchildren who are at the university college, send it to them. They can do a paper on it. You're helping them doing their research papers, or read it for yourself. Spread it out to your friends and family. That's what research is about. So here we go with the California Native American Museum.
When I look at how our history is presented often versus how histories and how our culture is presented in my family, the two don't match up, because what I see in my family is strength. I see perseverance. I see modern people who live modern lifestyles, who have respect for the past, who are trying to make things right.
There has to be a breath of honesty in history, and oftentimes we romanticize history.
Mission history is often just taught from a very staunchly pro-Spanish perspective, even in public schools.
It just didn't happen that along come the Spanish and the history of California started there. It wasn't a wilderness, untamed wilderness. The land was under the control of Indian people. The Padres and the Spanish soldiers came from the south to colonize California in 1769 to create a land base that they could call New Spain. They wanted to expand it from what is now Mexico, Baja, to Alta, California, which is now the state of California.
The first four major sites were the harbors of California, of Upper California. So San Diego, Santa Barbara, Monterey, and San Francisco. The Spanish needed to establish those harbors because they were afraid in the late 18th century that the Russians were coming down from Alaska looking for foods to supply their colonies. The Russians did get as far as 100 miles north of San Francisco at what today we call Fort Ross, back then was Fort Ruski. So they were concerned about the Russians. Sir Francis Drake had been here in the bay, and he was, if you were the King of Spain, he was a pirate because he was robbing the Manila galleon ships, making the Queen of England very, very wealthy. But to the King of Spain, he was a pirate. So Spain was concerned about the British in this area. France had control of a great, great portion of Middle America. So the King of Spain is worried about the Emperor Napoleon marching this way to occupy Upper California. The King of Spain was concerned that if these other foreign countries arrived here, they would keep marching south to Mexico City and attack Spain in Mexico City. So the way to defend Mexico was to establish presidios at the four great Upper California harbors.
The Spanish padres and their force of soldiers came here and disrupted the lives of the native Californians. They were looking for large populations of natives in their various communities so that they could immediately have a large labor force established.
And the Spanish method for establishing a presidio was to take the native peoples of an area, teach them how to build Spanish style, and then have them build and people these new areas in the Spanish way. The Spanish method for doing this was to send the padres, the priest, because part of the Spanish philosophy was to take the people you find in all these new places, new to the Spanish, not to the natives, in these places, and change them into good Spaniards. And part of the process of changing them was to begin with changing them into good Christians, into good Catholics. So the instruments of change, not only of the religion, but of language, of culture, of lifestyle, of religion, everything about the native peoples. The people who were to do the changing, the job task was the fathers, the padres. So the task was to bring native peoples into missions, teach them how to build a mission, and then they would be the workers that would go over and build the presidio.
It was a commercial venture. The natives here were the labor force, and they weren't even the paid labor force. It was indentured servitude. They had to work in the fields. Daily life for Indians in the mission system was deplorable. Being dragged from your own village, where you lived a life of peace, usually, to being a slave laborer in a mission context where you were separated from your family. The men were in one dorm, the women were in another dorm, and the children were separated from the women. And a lot of sexual abuse, a lot of physical abuse occurred. They were raped by the soldiers. If you didn't work the way they wanted you to work, you were beaten severely. There was outright killing, but I think the biggest crippling effect of the Spanish mission on native people in California were the diseases that were brought to California.
Did you catch that? Did you catch that? Diseases. But how were they transmitted back then? Right. Again, there's some eerie parallels. Let me allow this gentleman. I just needed to interject that. Let me allow him to finish his statement.
California by the soldiers and the padres, things like diphtheria, things like influenza, things like smallpox, and other diseases for which the native people had no immunity. If you took ill very seriously, they didn't necessarily try to heal you. They gave up on you, and you had to die. There are a lot of people buried around these missions, a lot of children buried around the missions. And so we lost hundreds of thousands of native people to diseases. It was a total destruction of their traditional way of life.
If we're presenting mission history from an aspect of social justice, of doing the right thing, of making sure that we're trying to be fair and be honest and accurate, then it does good for everybody. Not just us, but also letting the truth out and letting people know the history of our mission and how it's directly affected to the history of California.
Very positive piece there. And for once, the native people get to speak for themselves. And even, I'm sorry I interrupted at one point, but I wanted to kind of insert a little talking point. By the way, give me an opportunity to look at the live stream. I'm so happy. I have a small audience, but they're, like I've always been saying about Mary, they're on topic and they're having a really lively discussion. I'm gratified by that because that's what the benefits of a live stream are, and why I do these talks. And hopefully, the discussion will continue on and on and on. Some very good perceptive remarks and some comments that I'll follow up on myself without getting into the specifics. So thank you very much for that little time out there. And I wanted to hint at the diseases in a way that's not going to get me kicked off of TubeView again. I just came back recently after a long layoff, which I took time to purify and cleanse myself. And in watching this last piece, I realized that if I ever go to one of these missions, right, my first and primary purpose will be to go there to pray for the souls of the people, both native and immigrant peoples, who died and were buried at these missions. Not because I'm self-righteous or anything else, but I think that's the positive aspect of the system that was put in there, because whether you want to subscribe to it or not, or believe it, the majority of native peoples were converted. Cortez himself, once he conquered what is now Mexico City, Distrito Federal, Tenochtitlan, once he converted or conquered Mexico City under Moctezuma, thousands of Indians converted en masse to Catholicism. Why? Because the main tribe were cannibalizing them, right? I'm not saying that's what happened in Alta California, but there are any number of reasons for it. So the history, all I'm trying to establish is that the history can be exploited, because that the objective, we'll call it what it is, genocide of Native America in this part of the world, is and has been cynically exploited by people in my profession for a political agenda whose intention is to destroy the political sovereignty of the United States of America. So the guilt tripping is over. We're going back to the real history. The disease, the genocide, and all. We're gonna pray for forgiveness, and we're going to try to redeem all the priests in San Francisco who are coming out of the University of San Francisco. It's been totally queered out, and they're giving the Vatican a problem. Even the Pope Francis says the gay lobby is just driving him nuts. Right, not just San Francisco, California, but all over. I'm sensing a sea change, however, and ironically, the sea change has been brought about by the draconian measures that have been taken by these old imperial families and bloodlines who never went away, even in the age of revolution and the age of democracy and of the age of republicans, right? They never went away, and they've tried to recolonize all these beautiful areas of the world, including the Monterey Bay, Santa Cruz. So, are we going to be able to resist the techno-colonization of our world or not? We have no chance unless we really understand the cultural forensics of a history that goes back centuries long and is not restricted to America and not restricted to Western Europe. Because I did want to add that the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which ceded most of what we now call Alta California or Tejas, New Mexico, Nueva Mexico, a lot of the South American, South U.S. Southwest, ceded by the unfair Treaty of Hidalgo, Guadalupe Hidalgo, 1848, right? There was the Battle of Veracruz, which I want to visit. I've never been to Veracruz Peninsula. The very next year, 1848, the hero of the Battle of Veracruz, Commodore Perry. This very next year, 1590, they were going to waste any time to take over the world, man. He was a Freemason, by the way. Commodore Perry kept on going, man, and he came over to Okinawa, where my people are from, at least the maternal family, right? Um, and tried to take over, but our traditions were very strong. Indigenous traditions were very similar to Native Americans, by the way. They had female shaming. I won't go into it. It's very, very deep, and I'm not even qualified to even mention it. Right? Check out Yonaguni, the underwater city of Okinawa. It's stone. It's architectural marvel. People. Who's the guy that scuba dived it? I forgot his name. His work's wonderful. He did a whole book on Yonagi. Hancock. Yeah. What's his first name? His last name's Hancock. He did a book on Yonagi. That's Okinawa. But anyway, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, the Society of Jesus knew where the true wealth was. It was in Asia. Asiaticos, Marco Polo. He tried to come from the other way. So he went into Okinawa, Commodore Perry. He was kind of checking stuff out because his next stop was going to be the shogunal, the military dictator headquarters of Japon or Japan, and to say, we've got all these guns, we got these steamship, you're going to be our vassal state in the New World Order. Open up Japan, right? Because Japan was seen as the hermit. Well, that's Korea as a hermit. They're always saying Sakoku, Japan was closed off. No, Japan was they knew what the Jesuits are up to. They knew about the Freemasons. They spent the 150 years of the Tokugawa era preparing themselves and arming themselves and building up a spiritual tradition built on Bushido, the warrior tradition, so they would not be taken down in the 21st century. All right. 2 atom bombs didn't even work. Fukushima attack didn't even work. That's 3. I'm sorry. So I'm just trying to show you that never forget the Asian connection, because we're talking about a world system of domination. By the way, do the Japanese people themselves know this history? The average Japanese person, because again, you've seen all the little YouTubes and they're so polite and they all dress alike and they all look alike, right? Because you're still going off the 50s, 60s, or if you're younger, you only know them through anime. You don't know what's really happening. Not that I'm an expert, but I have lived there for sustained times for 2 different times. By the way, Okinawa is total SOJ. I was surrounded by SOJ assets. I didn't even know it, who were at the university that I was doing research, and they were making sure that I never got out of my little box and asked the wrong questions. All right. But to answer my question, do you think the average Japanese person knows what some of these revelations, let's call them, or not for you, for most Americans who are oblivious, blissfully ignorant of a lot of this material? Do you think they know? Maybe not the average one, but a very large percentage do. I'd say about 30, 45%. And they've known this for a long time. It's in their book. I know, because I go to Kinokuniya. It's the big national book chain, right? It's huge. They have everything. They have books from all over the world. Of course, you're going to pay a premium. They're expensive. Japanese books in Japanese language are really cheap because they want literacy. They want people to investigate all the different histories because they know it's important for to maintain their sovereignty, right? It's a reverence of learning that we've gotten away from America. We used to have it, not even as late recently as my generation, but we're getting it back. That's the good news. Yeah, they know a lot of it because I've seen the books written in Japanese and I know what they're about. They know about Sakamoto Ryoma as having been brought in the Freemasonic group by a Scottish Rite Mason by the name of Gruber, who came in to sell guns to the different factions, just like they did in Native America. Right? They tried to break up America by selling guns, teppo, rifles, gunpowder to the different factions so that they could take it over, because they knew that Japan was a jewel in their imperial crown that was worth fighting for. And so far, they've been able to stave them off. And perhaps that might be one of the reasons why Abe Shinzo was assassinated not that long ago. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all for my talk of today. Let me just leave you with a brief, refreshing, departing look at the Monterey Bay, which is now total Pentagon, DARPA, UN run. But nonetheless, they haven't been able to destroy, and not yet, the natural beauty of the area, even though they're trying to burn, flood, and drought most of us out of the state. See that building? I'll leave it right here. See that building, Tanimura? Yeah, that building built there, that's Japanese American people because they live there, they farm the area, they made it into a verdant, productive, highly productive agricultural area. And then the banker boys conspired, and the military and the intelligence, especially the Office of Naval Intelligence, conspired to put all these people in concentration camps during World War II, and they took all the land. And maybe some of the Tanimura family came back and started buying a little bit of the land so they can grow asparagus, garlic, strawberries, right, after the war. I know many, many families that were able to do that. And that's testament to the fact that we can come back from anything because we're Americans and we're human beings. So don't let this discourage you. Let it inspire you to dig deeply into the greatness that you have within yourself. So God willing, I'll be back with you next week. Bless you one and all. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today. Thank you. Bye.